Excellent. Welcome to the TADSummit podcast. We have our TADSummit Innovators section, and I'd like to welcome Paul Sweeney from Webio. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So we're going to kick off like we did last week with Johnny just giving a preview of the rants we will have on Friday in the Truth in Telecoms section. Johnny, how are you?
I'm really excited to get out with Paul because now that we're CPaaSAI, I got my own AI visionary.
Yes,
I'm new to the whole world, and me and Paul watching his videos last night really inspired me and got me excited. So I'm going to want to get into the podcast. But no, look, Truth in Telecoms this Friday is going to be the best one yet. And as you know, we've got thousands of viewers on that right now, and I've got all kinds of people in the backseat trying to tell me where to go with this. But I think here the top stories are Twilio, right?
Yeah.
What's going on with Twilio? That seems to be getting crazy amount of viewers, and what happened with the activist investors.
Yeah.
So actually, when I made my post the other morning, I actually got a message from one of the top analysts, investment bankers in the city, saying, well, did you know that the lady who sold $3 million worth of shares, put in, on the earnings call, basically said she was leaving? So my answer to him was, really, buddy? So why didn't you tell that to the story in the shorts that were saying that? So you guys are playing a game because they're just playing ping pong with Twilio and Cinch and whatever, shorts and the longs. So to have top analysts reach out to me is pretty exciting. And the amount of views that I'm getting from New York City, and last time I checked, there's no CPaaS or messaging companies in New York City. So I've got a lot of action going on there. But look, on the Twilio thing, really bothers me. I mean, he had to sit through 9 board meetings with a guy that gave him $50 million investment. The guy comes in with like $50, like, you have to sit and listen to me. I mean, can you imagine? So, I want to get into that this week to talk about now Twilio's up $29. Now Twilio's up 66. Cinch is up 29.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about a run. These things want to run. So CPaaSAI is working. Number two, I want to discuss, the Tata Supreme Court ruling against them, stealing intellectual property. And then, I get this note, we brought up UIB on there. Yeah. And then Toby Ruckert, who's the founder of UIB, puts a note in, Johnny, I tried reaching out to Tata in multiple ways and failed. Too many false friends or wrong gatekeepers in place. I think very sad, as this issue can really taint Tata Family Group legacy and values, not just that of smaller subsidiary. So Ken won't tell me what the hell happened with UIB and Tata, right? Because you can't get nothing out of that kid. I mean, it's like he should have been in a mob or something when he was a kid. He don't talk. And Toby comes in here and brings up this, so we really got to get to the bottom
of
what happened, because he just chimed in out of nowhere. So that's kind of exciting. And then you destroyed me last night by coming right after me. I mean, I've never been last time I was destroyed like that is when I found out that Syntec went to ex-Cineverse for permission, ex-Carlyle Group for permission to hire their longtime law firm, Carlyle Group, Mayor Brown, to represent Syntec versus Cineverse, which is 100% owned by Carlyle. And when I found that out, that was pretty speechless. I couldn't talk. Right, we were in a courtroom in Tampa, and the Germans told me, like, you did what? And so that was kind of crazy. But you're right. I mean, you totally torched me last night on. We're talking about bringing in sponsors and what have you for the hackathon, and you're right. I mean, MEF has a show today with Cineverse, net number, Monopoly, Aegis, Monopoly. So it's really the Monopoly Economic Forum, which I don't think MEF understands. That really doesn't help innovation.
Right.
So we have the three operators. We have the messaging monopolies piece. We have you're calling spade on some of these book clubs. I have a different view that me and you are going to definitely have our first fight on Friday. So I just want you to know and everybody know I'm coming after Alan.
Excellent. Looking forward to it, Johnny.
So that being said, let's get into some really positive stuff and exciting stuff, because this is the most exciting time.
No,
the most exciting time in our lifetime with AI and the convergence.
Paul has been talking about conversations for as long as I've known him. And we're talking about all the way back to some of the early pre-Telco 2 events. I think it was in the Bay Area. we met, it would be over 20 years ago now. And again, he was talking about conversations, but all the way back then. I think,
well, now Wall Street is. Well, Wall Street is. So
yes, yeah, exactly.
The money wants to hear.
So, Paul, maybe you could give a little bit of background, introduce, how you got to where you are today with Webio.
Again, thanks for having me on, guys. So Webio is basically conversation first, conversation AI company. We focus on the very difficult area of credit and collections, the most difficult customer service environment in the world. And we do that because we think that basically the credit and collections world has been broken for a long time. If you owe money to one company, you probably owe money to 5 or 6. You have to go through the same rigmarole with everyone, explaining why you need things moved, explaining why you need a bit of leeway here and there. And you have to go through a bunch of really difficult experiences. And that's just to stay still. It doesn't actually get you anywhere, right? And there's a bit about where you really, truly go digital. If you truly go digital, you don't have to behave in the same way, legacy ways going forward. And if you dig back and you go, well, why do we contact customers with certain patterns? It's, hey, we sent a letter once a month. It's, we expect a call once every 30, 60, 90 days. There's so many legacy patterns embedded in the way companies work that if you could truly make it digital, you could make it flexible and you could actually make it adaptive to the people in those relationships.
Yeah.
And what's more adaptable than a conversation? You and I can negotiate, we can explore, we can move boundaries with one another. And then all of a sudden, I don't have to pay you, the electricity company, €90 or $90 by close of business Friday. I can maybe pay you 40 on Friday, and I can pay you another 30 on Tuesday, and nobody's bothered by it. Everything's worked out fine.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, I don't get a fine as an end customer now for missing a payment date. There's no bounce direct debit costs. All these costs that are forced onto the people that can least afford them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a tax on poor people, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Now, during COVID, and I'm going to put this in inverted commas, we found out that nearly everything could be done digitally. Like if you can go to a web front end or you're in a messaging stream, I can just go, hey, can I move that to Friday? Yes, you can. Can I do that? Like we had companies with like hundreds, if not thousands of agents move entirely to messaging over SMS and messengers. No phone calls at all, like none, like overnight. And they did not suffer a lot from that.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that having these conversations, now it's, again, I said, these are difficult conversations with people, right? But if I say something like, I'd like to pay you €30, right? I've got to be able to look into your account. I got to be able to see who you are. I got to know what your account is. And I have to be able to execute some actions, like present the balance, say you can pay this amount of money. You know, there's some API stuff that you need to integrate with.
Yeah.
So what we did is we said to ourselves, okay, if these are going to be some of the most sensitive conversations, and there's so many bits that need to be kind of corralled together to make it work, what we'd like to do is have everything in the stack ourselves. So we built our own NLU engine, our natural language understanding engine. We actually trained our own large language model. So we built our own custom large language model specifically for the requirements of credit and collections. And we built our own dialogue manager. So this is like a framework to say, if this happens, then this happens next. Check this, do that. Like it's a logical flow, right?
Yeah, workflow, yeah.
And having them together means that none of our data goes anywhere. So we're not training anyone else's engines. Your data's not going anywhere. No one's sniffing exhaust fumes from your interactions and trying to figure out what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And so there's many reasons why we think, and we've always believed that, and I'd like to claim some credit for it, but I can't because it's law in the EU now, right?
Yeah.
Which is ethical AI means that you've got to like be able to say where your data is being trained, what's it's been trained on, Why are you getting the results you're getting? And can I please have a report to show me how all that's happening?
Yeah.
And doing that across multiple different stacks and multiple different providers, that's going to be hard, right?
Yes.
But we've built it from the ground up so it can do that. And not only that, but we've always believed that ultimately a company is going to want to have its own AI. So, hey, you know what? I've trained my data on this stuff. This is all my data. It's my labeling. I've actually altered the labels and created my own labels and trained my AI. So that's all my data as well.
Yeah.
I want to add in things into it now. Like I've trained it on like contact information and customer service information. Do you know what? I'm going to bring in some of my other data, like you might want to bring in service agreements, just to give you an example, or a maintenance agreement or something like that. You know what? Bring that in, train that on your AI and on your language model. And so what happens? And so where you end up, now I'd like to say, hey, you're very smart to know all this stuff. You kind of end up there kind of following themes, right?
Yes.
But where you end up with is every company is going to have a custom language model.
Yeah.
Every enterprise. It's like having a database.
Yeah.
Every single company has to have their own custom language model. And if you don't, you're in a really bad place. Like, I can't emphasize it enough. You're in a really bad place. What you're going to end up doing is saying, hey, Microsoft, or hey, Google, how would you like to have this whole layer in the middle where everything's actually happening? It's like where all your kind of intelligence and sensing is happening, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you looked at what happened with the contact centers, the contact center business over the last kind of 15 years, you look at all the major providers that now sit on Amazon, right? I remember you had a slide there, remember a couple of years ago, where you looked at all of them and you say, hey, all these guys are actually sitting on Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really funny. Now, their dialogue management stuff, hey, hold on a second. They're using Google and Amazon dialogue managers in the middle of that too.
Yeah.
These guys are slowly emptying themselves out.
Yes.
And the analogy that I think we had on the day was it's like GM in the 60s.
Yeah.
Where they didn't have enough platforms to build the cars on. They only had single platforms, so all the cars ended up looking the same. So what happens is you do kind of lower costs for a while, but what happens is you lose differentiation and niche advantage in the longer term. So strategically, it made a lot of sense to go that way. Now, the way that kind of shows up today, in a very simple example, is we've trained our platform to understand this customer is starting to display characteristics of a vulnerable person.
Yeah.
Now, vulnerable person over here is someone who might have, they can't pay this bill. Like they don't have the money to pay this bill, or paying this bill actually puts them in a very, very difficult situation. And that's going to come back on us and the regulator looking at us. There's health vulnerabilities, there's family vulnerabilities, right? So there's this whole range of things that if you were able to sense properly, you'd get to them faster, and you'd put them in front of not an AI, you'd put them in front of a person.
Yeah, exactly.
And that person would now be able to go, you know, I'm gonna, what's this? According to this conversation and according to this little hint over here, maybe I should ask him a little bit, has anything changed in your home life recently that we should know about? And you go, yeah, actually, I've gone through a very, significant marital breakup, and I'm now kind of homeless technically. It's like, oh, okay, let's figure out what we can do to help you, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got an assistant to that customer service agent that's saying, okay, we've figured out that something's going on here. Here's typical questions that you might ask this person, and make sure, careful with the tone, like the tone is going where the tone is going down. So building that kind of vulnerability assessment in this specific type of conversation, giving these specific types of information and data that you've got available to you, as you could tell, is not something that you would throw open to OpenAI. It's not something that you'd say, hey, send this out, give me back some data so I can pump in a response to this conversation.
Exactly.
So I think that we've actually just this week won an award in the UK for best use of AI and ML with the credit and collections industry over there, which we're very proud of.
Yep. So that congratulations.
Thank you. And it's great because again, it's the niche market that we're hoping will appreciate us.
Yeah.
We were nominated again for best use of AI and most ethical use of AI in the Irish AI Awards. So we are recognized by our industry and our peers that we're doing things the right way. But again, I think entrepreneurs, you've the line I kind of have is you've got to be convicted about the space you're in.
Yes.
Like you've got to have a sense that you're not just building software. Like we want to get to the place where if you ever grew up in a house where an envelope arrived and dropped in the morning and your mother looked at it and went, she went white.
Yeah.
And you knew that she did not know how she's going to pay that bill. If you've ever lived in that world, that moment is just something that you never want to see in a house. And the ripple effects of that, like if you grew up in a house where the tensions are so high because you don't know what you're going to do about how to pay these bills, like that makes for a very difficult home life.
Yeah.
And it makes for a very difficult personal life. Like if you are under financial pressure, it's just, again, it's biology and science, right? Your ability to think narrows in.
Exactly.
Because your head is flooded with all these hormones that say, narrow. I don't know how to make this decision. Just go for the quickest, go for the quickest. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, right? It's a very frightening place. And so when I talk about conversations, and we'll get to this, is like we have so many different types of conversations that we don't even think about.
Yeah.
We have conversations, there's just about money, right? Just to think about money. You have to have a conversation with yourself around what your situation is. Now, how many people have that conversation with themselves? Right? You're like, I don't want to think about it.
Exactly.
Here's a crazy thing. Here's a crazy thing for you. For people who have like real money problems, they won't check. Were you ever in a situation where you looked at the ATM machine and you went, I actually don't want to know. Right? I actually don't want to know what my balance is, because then I'll know.
Exactly.
I'd rather have one more hour where I don't know exactly what my situation is.
It's called optimism.
Right?
People don't want to lose optimism. They don't want to lose hope.
Yeah.
But in the USA, we have 60% of this country that's paycheck to paycheck.
I follow it very, very closely, and the book originally, Nickel and Dime to Death in America, is a terrible it's a terrible indictment of how precarious people's lives are. And I guess what I just want to, like, if they say, hey, there's a mission, there's some sort of mission about what we're trying to do, right? Imagine that if you move people to a situation where they didn't miss that one bill, that didn't trigger that one thing, that didn't cause their mother to go, and do something terrible.
Brilliant, priceless.
Right? And it doesn't have to happen. That's this, like where you see stupidity, like you see, this is a stupid way of doing things. Yeah. You go, well,
you don't have the information. So basically, like I saw on your video this morning, you're basically using AI for the betterment of humanity, for the betterment of people's life, because there's nothing more important than being able to feed yourself and keep your lights on.
Well,
because you can't.
It's an easy thing. It's an easy thing, like to be like all Silicon Valley about, right? But there's some conversations you need to be a part of.
Yeah.
To like you can't just kind of go, hey, we built this amazing thing. Why don't you come and try it out? Like you've got to get yourself into the conversations.
Exactly.
Where tilting that table, 5 or 10% one way or the other has really significant effects. Yeah. And like if we're talking to 1 million people and we're managing some of those conversations and we're able to say, hey, let's explore a little bit here. Let's give a little bit of flexibility there. Let's try and find out a little bit more there. And X amount of people don't like find themselves homeless at the end of the week or find themselves with enough money to pay for their groceries. That is going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're following stuff that's happening, I mean, the UK is actually very progressive in this area, and it's built up a lot of professionalism and legislation in this area,
yeah.
and it's super professionalized. It's a really strong business now. But if just following some, like, there's two sides to it. Like, there's people who loan, there's people who borrow, right? You got to look at both sides as to why people are borrowing and what they're borrowing for and what they're trying to do with the money. And there's, like, surprising that the amount of tools that people have for doing that, they're not popular, they don't get used, people don't use their budgeting tools, they don't use it. Yeah. So what does happen is, if I go to a business and they offer me flexibilities, they offer me new ways of doing things, I find myself kind of going there and saying, I think I can move this bill. I think I can break this up a little bit. Maybe I can get a pause. Maybe I can do that with this company. They go, and if you're using good technology and you say, look, you know, this customer will, or we call it payment adherence.
Yeah.
It's like, I will adhere to my payment plan. But if I can adopt that plan and increase the adherence to it, like, fewer and fewer people are stressed by it, right? Yeah. And because you're not stressed by it, you can do other things. Now, we think that, like, if you look at, there's some, like, go look at the amount of money that people pay on overdraft fees, late payment fees, penalties, right? Just go look at the scale of that business. Now, off the top of my head, again, I think it's in the kind of area of around 40 billion.
Go to merchant advances and 30% that they're extorting Americans on. Are you guys in the USA?
No, we're not in America.
You need to get here fast. Because
don't talk to my CEO. He'll be able to
I would love to talk to him, because I think you guys are really needed here. Is anybody doing what you do in the USA?
There's a couple of companies. I don't want to name drop them because I really respect them. And I think they're run by people who really are trying to do a similar thing. I think what's like in the theme of this conversation, what I think is happening is there is a mandate now for our industry to go digital. Now, go digital means stuff to everybody, right? It's like, but if you can take a photograph, right? Take a picture of your driver's license, take a picture of your bill, take a picture of the meter, send them all into your conversation. Yeah. AI extracts the data, checks it against your existing bill, checks it against your next thing, and is able to come back to you and going, hey, Paul, actually, your meter usage or your power usage is pretty average for this time of year for your type of house.
Yeah.
Would you like to maybe get something to help you measure where you might be having heat loss? And I go, yes, I'd love that. Can you send me it? And we know your address. We say, okay, we're going to send you something. It's going to arrive in 2 days' time. Here's a brief video on how you install it and use it, right? And you go, wow, that was a really, like, frictionless conversation. I'm using pictures, I'm using sound, I'm using text, but all the way, it's actually conversational. It's all driven by conversational interaction. And I think that what we're seeing at the moment is like the super thin edge of what's happening. It's like saying, wow, isn't dial-up amazing? Right? I can get pictures on my computer.
Yeah. It's
awesome. It took me 2 hours to get it, but look at it. Isn't it beautiful? We're at a really early stage here.
Yeah.
And I'm around the block a little bit now, and I tend to know that this is the way things are going to go. And it usually takes 3 times as long as I think it's going to take. Right? It usually takes, it's like, even though it's kind of obvious what's going to happen, it takes 3 times the length of time. And the way I think about this is, I had this feeling from around the year 2000. I remember someone worked in a consultancy organization explaining to me how computer software worked. And it was like, okay, so this company, very successful company, right, said, okay, so how does this work? I say, well, first of all, there's an RFP for getting this thing. And then there's someone successful. And then they send you the discs, and you get this pack of discs. So, and then what happens? Well, they get the discs, and someone comes and puts it on the computers. And what happens? Well, then they have to get someone else to actually make it work, because it never works. So then what happens? Well, then you get another consultancy in, which is also us, to come in and train all the people on how to use it, because it's new software. And then what happens? Well, then it kind of fails because there's only 15% success rate for new software projects. And I went, this is a business. This is, yeah, this is nuts. Like I'm just out of college and I'm going, oh, brain, no compute. This does not work. And I had seen this new technology, which was application service provider, where you could open a browser window and there would be software there and you could use it. And it was just totally obvious to me that if it didn't work, you'd get a different one. And maybe that one would work or another one would work. There'd be no more installations. There'd be no more trainings. There'd be no more all that. None of that stuff was going to happen. And I was totally convinced it was going to happen, right? And then I was talking to a company in 2003 about contact centers in the cloud. All that stuff could be in the cloud. No. None of that stuff is going to the cloud. It'll never happen. No one's going to trust their software to the cloud. No one's going to make a purchase through this. No one's going to share the credit card over this kind of stuff. So it's like, no, obviously that's going to happen. And it was only 8 years later that it was done. 8 years later, it was like kind of done. So I think where we are now, 1 year later, is OpenAI came in. Everybody had a magical experience with the technology that's been around for a little bit, but it was the experience. It was, I know how to type. I know how to ask a question because we've all been trained to use this from all the stuff around our web chats.
Exactly.
Like you can ask, it's just like a very, very smart web chat with a wizard. So I put in my stuff and it comes back and it feels like magic. And that moment, everyone went, oh, something's happening, right? So we're only 1 year into it, really. Now, a lot has happened, and a lot of money's gone into it, but we're still, the important thing to know is this is only the start of the journey. But, and again, here's me falling for my own logical fallacies again and again and again. I think it's going to happen faster this time. Right. Because the general trend are things are starting to happen faster. But I'm normally wrong. It takes 3 times as long as I think it's going to take.
Exactly.
So that's the run-in, guys. I hope that gives you
No,
enough.
that's excellent. And just I had a question because of the UK, and we've covered on TADSummit open banking because we were looking at as an analogy, can we move into open telecom? Do you use some of the open banking resources with your application?
So so the quick answer is no.
Okay.
And we've a very, very so our conviction is open banking will be everything.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not that it's not going to happen. So it's what are you going to use it for?
Okay.
So there's a couple of use cases. One is for payments, which is really interesting, but it wasn't broad enough yet to use at the kind of scale of customers that we want to use it for.
Gotcha.
But if you think about it, all the open banking is going to really hurt gateway providers. Like all the PSPs are in real trouble unless they figure this out. Right?
Gotcha.
Really fast. The second thing about open banking that's interesting is being able to get the data. So, hey, if you share your profile, we'll be able to figure out, okay, not only who you are and some of your contact data, but we'll be able to, if you choose to share, we can see what your spending is like and what your patterns are like. Exactly. And then we can fit the payment pattern to your open banking behaviors, right? We know what the thing is. So that's also kind of compelling. But what I would say to you is you've got to watch the incentives on both sides of that.
Yes.
So the customer incentive to share is really important and what's in it for them. And also being responsible about asking people to share and you know, your power versus their power. Like if I say, hey, Alan, how would you like to share your open banking data with me so I can get this thing done? And you go, I really need this thing done. Like this is how I'm getting my groceries today. So I press accept. Yeah. Like that's an unacceptable use of power.
Gotcha.
So you got to be careful around that.
Understood.
And but just at the core of it, the open banking data, your cash flow, what you spend on is all super critical confidential data. Yeah. And also you don't want that data going anywhere, right? So that's where having the closed loop process comes in again.
Ah, gotcha.
Right. You got to be really careful about that. And so that's the second bit of the open banking data. The third bit about the open banking data is where it gets interesting on continuous variable payments.
Yes.
So I want to pay you every month, whatever it is I owe you for this month. It's not a set amount. It varies because my usage varies.
Yeah.
So I want to set up with my power company, hey, pay this every month. And it could be like $49.95. It could be $32.72. That varies. But if you can set up that payment authority as a continuous variable payment through open banking, the costs of that really go down for everybody.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happens is now we're digital. Because remember that thing I was saying about, hold on a second, you've shared your payments, you've shared the amounts. I'm now on an open banking platform that allows me to change times, dates, and amounts and authorities with minimal costs.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you're in a truly digital process for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is just like, I'm just watching it going, yeah, I know it's inevitable. Can we
It's take a lot longer in the US, my friend.
Yeah, it will.
I go to every gas station I go to. They have two signs. You pay with cash, you pay with credit. You pay with cash, you get a huge discount.
Yeah.
There's pizzerias, there's restaurants. Pay with cash, big discount.
Yeah.
Pay with credit card, we'll charge you another 4%. Pay with debit card, we'll charge you another 4%.
Right.
So right now in the USA, there's a big fight on them wanting to be the USA to be cashless. It's never going to happen because small business still runs the USA and the people are pushing against that. So what a fascinating conversation. Just
the thing about that also is, like, again, everything is multifaceted, right? So the reason people might want to use cash is, I don't want you knowing who I am. Thank you very much. I'm just
100%.
I'm just here to buy cigarettes. I'm just here to buy this magazine. I'm just here to buy this newspaper. I don't want you profiling me and, figuring out.
That's really not the reason. The reason the store wants you to give them cash so they don't have to report it. It's very simple.
Yes, but the customer may also not want to pay with a debit card or a credit card.
Most customers
might want cash.
A lot of people are using prepaid debit. I think customers are getting an advantage for using cash. So people will now go out of their way to take cash out of an ATM because my two favorite pizzerias, they don't take credit card. They're like, you don't pay cash, you don't eat.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of a reversal in the USA. Again, I'm not familiar with Europe.
But if you took that, right, if you just took that and said to yourself, hey, let's just think forward here. And we said, look, everything's open banking and we're all paying very minimal fees for transactions and interactions. Yeah. And what happens next? Like, what happens next? I think that's the interesting kind of speculations. What happens next? And so the same kind of what happens next, just to bring it, like, that's the cash and money side of things, right? Like, we've seen an explosion of on-demand loans, buy now, pay later loans, but also B2B financing and SME financing, where in process I can get a loan on my invoices or whatever other data I have. But it would seem that one of the most valuable assets that can be shared is your company's payments, receivables, and bill what you're due to pay. If I can get that information in a way that's somewhat like has integrity to it, like it's on Sage or it's on some finance platform.
Big problem in the US with loan sharking and politically, merchant loans. I mean, extorting companies. Banks aren't giving these small businesses guns. So you got these merchant advance companies. And, depending on what political party you're on, is depending on who's arguing about it. I'm fascinated to know is there an opportunity to bridge and hey, how do I phrase this? Take your stack and bring it to America. I mean, I could just walk down the street with your product.
Well,
I could be like a salesman, like T-shirt here.
Yeah. There are specific things you got to, like, technically no, right? Because we've built the whole thing. It's completely containerized. It's got all that microservices stuff.
So somebody can't take what you have. Like, you're talking about the enterprises. You're talking about, like, look, JP Morgan, look at the credit card companies. All these paid companies would want what you have.
Oh yeah, they can do that. Yeah, they could adopt us,
but they got to use you.
No, they're fine. They can use us. They could use someone like us. I mean, they can use our
But
product,
they're
right?
going to want to keep it in house.
They can if they
Sure.
like right now. What they would want to do is they'd want to containerize that on premises in some way and say, hey, you've got a lovely containerized stack. Can I have it and put it in my container, please? I want it on my stack. And that's how they work.
Mm-hmm.
So
Are
as
you
long as
guys
it's
looking to go? Are you
containerized-
guys looking to go public? Are you raising capital? Have you raised capital? How
Well-
does somebody participate? Because I see you guys being really successful. I mean,
Well-
just the fundamentals of your business and
Well,
what you're doing is priceless.
So the long and the short of it is, like, obviously as a tech company, you're always going to be in some sort of funding cycle, right? You're always figuring out what do I need to do next. So what we've spent the last 2 years doing is basically building an architecture underneath the large language model. Because here's what happens. Once you start building these language models, everything under it needs to transport the data to the model in real time. That's really tricky. And the architecture underneath it needs to be super scalable at a really kind of finite level. And it means that every part of it needs to be individually scalable. So that's how you contain your ultimate costs. So what we wanted to do was invest our effort in making sure that the stack was scalable. And now what's happening is we're getting some huge, like genuinely very large European companies into our process now. So that time is well spent. So in 2024, like, you're going to see like big kind of announcements coming from us about our European rollout. Yeah, so that's,
Yeah,
that's
but we want to
exciting.
be on the inside of these big announcements. Paul.
Well, we're not a publicly quoted company, so I'll probably
Okay,
tell you on
but
a
even
podcast.
privately, I mean, so I guess we'll talk offline. But
Sure, we'll have a chat offline.
it's really exciting. I really see so much value, and kind of correlates back to what you talked about in that little clip that I reposted today. That Alan really should get out there more. The little clip about the washing machine, and it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant.
Well, can I just give you just another different kind of story?
You can give me. I'll stay here all day. Yeah.
Say how far I think this kind
I
of
love
goes.
it.
So we're sitting here in a Zoom meeting, right? And we're having a conversation. And the kind of what if is, hey, what if Zoom was able to like listen to this conversation in real time and figure out what was going on? And you go, Paul, it's kind of able to do that. You go, well, what's happening? So I'm talking and you're kind of going, yeah, but at the end of the call, I'd really like to know brief summary of what he said or the main points. So you got a summarization feature, right?
Yeah.
And then I want to say, well, look, did anyone ask me to do anything? Did anyone ask me to do anything? It's like, actually, yeah, Alan asked you to send him something like a document. And I go, okay, anytime that happens again, will you just kind of send me a little to-do with Alan's, whatever he asked me to do on it, and put it in my stack, whatever I use for managing to-dos. Just make that automatic, will you? Yeah, great. So what happens is, what we're doing is we're having conversations, but there's events in the conversations. There's things happening. And what if I said, hey, Alan, will you agree to pay me that money on Friday? And he says, £80? Correct. Yeah, no problem, Paul. I'll send that to you by Friday. That's both a commitment and an actionable thing. Maybe that is actionable. Maybe that's something that goes to Alan's account and he just automatically pays me in some way, right? So we're talking about it. We're talking about doing things. We're talking about things that are actionable. All that is extractable from our conversations. Now, let's imagine that we've got a company with loads of little people like ourselves on loads of little Zoom calls, all doing this, right? It's all being extracted. It's all being automated. You go, wow, that's all kind of very exciting. Now, what if there's somebody sitting on top of all those conversations and they're called the CEO or the CFO or something, or the human resources manager, and they go, do you know, show me, look at all our meetings and find any meetings where there's factors that make some meetings more popular than others or less popular than others. And it comes back and it says, funny enough, all the meetings where Paul is in, they're rating high for excitement and entertainment, but we got nothing done, and people stopped turning up to his meetings. It's like, oh, that's seems like a super successful guy, but actually underperforming. We better call him in here for some performance management, right? Or any meeting that Paul's in, he's sucking up too much of the airtime. Other people aren't getting to contribute. Let's bring him in and talk to him about bringing people into conversations. Here's the next level. Paul's talking in a conversation. There isn't that many people otherwise contributing to the conversation. Let's look at where everyone's eyes are. Let's look at their body movement. Let's look at how they're paying attention or not. They're not really paying attention. Hold a second. Paul's a senior guy in this company. I wonder if it's the same with every other senior person in the company. Run for all senior. It's the same for every senior person in the company. And what I'm getting to in this is, once you've got all the information, you don't know what the second and third order effects of that are going to be. You're collecting it, but you don't know why you're collecting it. You don't know how it's going to be used in the next second and third steps. Yeah. What if you found that actually, I'll go back to why I'm so worried about this. Somebody close to me was running a project about data in government. And basically she was saying, you shouldn't collect that data. And this is how we might as well collect it. He says, well, back in the very efficiently run Amsterdam Council back in the 1930s, they thought it'd be a very good idea just to know where all the Jewish people in the city were. And the Nazis cleared that town out faster than any other town in Europe because they had all the data. It wasn't collected for that purpose.
No.
But I'll tell you, the outcome was pretty horrific, right?
Exactly.
So what I'm just saying about conversational technology is it's at its early stages, but once everything's recorded, we're all remote, we're all working in offices, we're all bringing people in. If everything's recordable, everything's analyzable, we can pull data out of everything. Sure, we can get things done. Sure, there are going to be efficiencies, but there's also going to be second and third order effects. And what we need to do is be careful about it and think about it. And then act like, okay, think about it, and then wind back and go, hey, you know what? We could have some rules around this.
Exactly. Right. With
and
my vCon hat on, it's like, that's why we need vCons, so that you can remove that once you realize, oh shit, that now exposes us.
Here's where I went, Paul. So Zoom is trading at 68.80, down from 569.
Yeah.
If they can do what you just said they're going to do, and what they can do, they're a buy.
Yeah, but they made a mistake. You see, this is why
I want to know.
Yeah, they made a mistake. Their mistake is that they didn't manage their exposure of their terms and conditions properly. Yeah. Right. And it didn't seem to be above board. It's like, you're just going to record them by default? No. I turn on when I want them recorded because there's a value exchange for me doing so. And that's
it should be a service that they sell companies as one-offs, like the software disks, where they house that for individual companies that want to manage their own employees and their own performance, whether it be if Paul's sucking up all the air or not doing what he has to do. This is really exciting stuff that I'm learning here. I love this AI stuff.
Well, it's similar as a problem. It's similar as a problem set to surveilling employees in any way.
Yeah.
So, like, if you have surveillance, like working from home, you could say, well, you're working from home. I'm paying you to work 9 to 5. I want to ensure that you're at your computer from 9 to 5. And as an employer, I have the right to surveil you to do that, right? In America, it's like, great, that's exactly right. I'm paying you. I want you to be there. In Europe, if you do that, you are being sued so hard.
Yes.
Right?
You're not doing that in the US.
No. But the theory of why do you do things? What would you do with the AI? Like, why do you want to do it? What's its purpose? What are you using it for?
Exactly.
It's exciting times.
Oh yeah.
It's
just quickly, in your category, there are companies like FICO that do this whole, like the reminders on payments and the scheduling, and have, a sort of, I guess, a sort of more of a legacy focused process. It's not using the intuition you're getting from using the LLU to detect, issues.
Look,
No, I know you. So is FICO a channel or an? I'm just trying to understand. If you're looking at moving to the US, how would you position with somebody like them?
Well, it's kind of like what does FICO want to do rather than what we want to do? Like we know what we want to do, right?
Yeah.
So if they want to go, hey, you know what? We're going to use these guys to run these conversations because they're focused and they really have the data for it and they've built it. Why not just use them? That's one approach they could take. They could go and say, you know what? This is kind of really epically strategic for us, and we have just woken up and go in and build the thing themselves. And I think at large company level, almost the error is to try and build it yourself the whole time.
Exactly.
There's just so many things that you got to nail, and strategically you got to figure out what's the core thing that we need to get right.
Yeah.
And I love this exercise where you put your company up on a board and you take away things. You say, if we didn't do that, would we still be us? If we didn't do that, would we still be us? And it can get really, really, really focused.
Yeah.
And I think not a lot of companies really kind of know what is their core focus, like what are they really, really about. Yeah. I think for us, one of the learnings that we've had over the last while is if you can 100% automate something, the impact is exponentially greater. Yeah. So your job is, how do I get to 100% automation of a process? If you can do that, what happens is it kind of moves from one mental category to another for the business to go, I don't think about that anymore.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of done. Now my attention is on this bit over here, the next thing. Not like I've got 10% that I got to manage. You still got to log in. You still got to check things. Like getting to 100% automation is the real release lever for companies. The other thing is, what is it that you can do now with AI that you couldn't do before? Like, what is it that you can now do that you couldn't do before? And like yourself putting in some OCR technology, like that could get kind of expensive and it could get kind of tricky, right?
Yeah.
If you can get an LLM to do that, Alan, right? A whole category of technology kind of disappears.
Exactly.
Right. And so that's another opportunity. And then the kind of other opportunity is what can you do with other groups or targets that you could never have thought of before? Like that kind of, well, we'd never have serviced those people because the cost of servicing is €5.
Yeah.
And they're trying to borrow €3. So why would I do it? It's like I'm losing £2 every time I do it.
Yeah.
So what kind of new markets are there? And just to give you a kind of brain kind of teaser, look at all the companies out there that are software service subscription companies, right? And I say this at like around my office a bit. So like payments are the same as subscriptions. I'm subscribing to my electricity company.
Yep.
I'm subscribing for this financial service. I'm kind of subscribing for my software. I'm subscribing for my Spotify.
Yep.
Like the goal of every business is to be a subscription business.
Yeah.
I don't want to do one-off sales. So if you think about it like that, then how would your mind change? How would your approach change if you could, say, run your subscriptions differently? If you could run your offer differently, if the payments were taken differently, if you had variable plans rather than the one plan, or if you had an offer that was just one offer, but boy, it was bang on. Like all that is about what can you now do differently that the AI is available to everybody? And it's going to get better and better. And the only question is like there's, I think, some certainty around how the LLMs get better over time, because that's kind of a curve that's known now, like Moore's law. And so the other questions under that are, is emergence a thing? Like, are there really emergent properties, or is it just kind of another hallucination of the system, right? Is it real? And when will it be able to truly do calculations that we can rely on?
Yeah.
Like when is the logical kind of like rigid logical thinking kind of embedded into the system?
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of how it's like broadband meeting wireless, right?
Yeah.
Somehow, if they connect, now you've got ubiquitous connections. There's some kind of exponential possibilities that roll out of that. And so the challenge is then, can you invent things that are like entirely new? Like I don't want to pick on a company, but like if you said, there's a big credit scoring company, let's say,
yeah,
and their job is to give you a rating on somebody. Well, you don't need 5,000 programmers. You don't need legacy databases. What I need is an LLM that's trained on a credit score and that says, hey, what's the likelihood that Paul is good for this? And if it gives me a very accurate, decent score, maybe it's a point or two less accurate than the professional legacy player. But what if it was free?
Yeah.
Like, what if it was a different business model? Like if somebody turns up to your website and you don't know them, they don't have the credentials. If you can do a very quick, fast credit check on that person by them giving you 2 pieces of data, and you can go, actually, there's a very good chance that you qualify for insurance with us. I just need 2 other pieces of data to increase the accuracy of my proposal to you. Would you be willing to give me your postal code and I don't know, whatever the other piece of data,
date of birth or whatever,
whatever, date of birth. And so it comes back and goes, there's a 90% chance that you qualify for new dental care plan that we're selling. I don't know who you are. I know that your credit is probably very good or decent enough. I know your kind of age, and I'm willing now to get involved, to spend time in qualifying you further because the technology's enabled me to do that.
Exactly.
So I think that there'll be loads and loads of niche cases.
As an example.
As an example. And you just like you pick your vertical and you figure out where's the data. Like every conversation will tell you what the conversation needs to succeed.
Exactly.
If we're 2 Irish people meeting, it will be a minute in and I'm going, and so tell me, where are your people from? And so that she'd be your aunt then. And of course Paddy'd be your uncle. And then they'll say, I have you now. All right. And what they mean by I have you now is I not only know you, but I know your people. I know where you come from. I know you're good people. If you wanted to stay the night here, no problem. Right. So I have social construct. I have you now. Is like everything opens up to you because of that one little piece of conversation, right? So the way we talk, the way we share, the way we figure out who we are, the way we figure out who other people are. I think if my mother knew that you could hold up a phone, speak into the phone, and the phone would translate that into French, and that French person could speak back to the phone and it would speak to me in English. If she knew that that was possible, she would have forgiven me for not doing my French homework and playing football instead, right? Because she said in the future, computers will do this for me.
Exactly.
That feels like, if you again think about it, I was in Napoli the summer, and we were getting a taxi back to the airport. The driver had the little device on the dashboard. He asked me to pick my language, so I picked English. He spoke, it came up in English. I spoke, it came up in not Italian, but Nepalese. He didn't even speak Italian. He spoke Nepalese. Right?
Completely different language. Every town in Italy is different.
But I'm going to have to draw a line because we could be talking for hours here. So again, Paul, Johnny, thanks so much for your time with this. This was really insightful. Long, but I think very much worth the time. So again, thank you so much, guys.
Absolutely.